Hi, Mina. Hi, Chronicles Tifosi. Hope you're all doing well this Sunday night and not expired as I felt like Mina might be after that Atalanta Juventus game. That was that was something. I probably shouldn't dwell on it too long, frankly, because there was much more interesting things that happened this weekend than that 0-0 draw. But one of the most unambitious performances I've seen, even from Allegri's Juventus. It was interesting. There were some numbers that surprised me off the back of this game. Apparently, only the 10th time that Juventus have had a 0-0 draw under Max Allegri in 273 games across his separate stints at the club. The third of this second stint, which is 83 games old. So perhaps fewer than we would have thought, or that I would have imagined in my head, for how often it feels like we watch this game from Allegri's Juventus. And yeah, I think I want to say as well that perhaps it's not entirely a one-way street. I enjoyed Martin de Roon at the end of the game posting on Twitter and saying, "Oh, I'm sorry to report this is the most interesting thing that happened in the game," and it was just like a sliding tackle by the sideline. But I think it's worth mentioning that Atalanta have kept 5 clean sheets so far this season. So I do think not entirely just one team's fault that we got this game. Atalanta are playing a more conservative game than perhaps they have in previous seasons under Gasperini. But let's not dwell on that game. Probably shouldn't even have started there, but it just made me laugh because right before I was about to start this recording, I saw a picture of Luciano Spalletti all cozied up warm in his snood for the night and thinking, gosh, of all the games the Italy manager could have chosen to get to this Sunday, maybe not the one. But there were some other interesting games. I'm just coming off watching Roma win 2-0 against Frosinone, which actually also wasn't a very interesting game. So I don't know how I've done that segue. But I do think it's the game I want to talk about first, just because there's been such a context to it this week. I think my last postcard, I was talking about the loss to Genoa and the situation Mourinho and how badly it's going. He gave this interview just a day or two ago, losing sense of time as always, in which he talked about he talked about wide-ranging things. He talked about the fact that he had this offer to become extremely well paid in Saudi Arabia. He didn't name the club, but subsequently was named by Fabrizio Romano, and 30 million euros a season would have been an extremely lucrative deal for him, and him sort of saying no to that because he felt that he had made his commitment before the end of last season to Roma, to the Friedkins, to the fans, and sort of harping on that point of, look, I've shown loyalty to be here. I didn't have to be here. I had other options, but I want to be here. I'm going to be your manager until the end of this season, as long as the Friedkins want me to be. And a little bit of sort of classic Mourinho defiance in there for sure, but perhaps also a little bit of that Mourinho, so you should appreciate me as well, so you should love me even if the football isn't up to scratch. And I think you can sort of take two different views on that. I think there is certainly truth that Jose could have taken that money and gone off to Saudi and been richer for it, and lots of people would have made that choice. And there is a certain sort of respect in hanging around and trying to fight in this more competitive setting in Europe rather than taking the easy life. It doesn't surprise me actually that Jose would be that sort of character. I don't think he's ever been the one who's so driven just by the money side of it. I think the glory has always meant more to him. I still personally have my doubts about whether or not, if that offer had come from a club that was a European club that wanted him, that was more to his taste or more able to go after those big trophies than Roma. My own personal scepticism will remain what it was. I think the interesting point really here was, how was the crowd going to react to this team after such a disastrous start? As I said in midweek, it was the worst start Jose's ever had to a league season, and coming off that hammering by Genoa, it really felt like they were going back home and they just had to win this game against Frosinone. Nothing else mattered, and we were all curious to see what it was going to look like, and what the crowd was going to look like, whether it was going to be more cheers or whistles, whether it was going to be a sportive environment, and it was more cheers than whistles. It remains true that Jose has been a huge driver for the crowd and the atmosphere in Rome, and I do think that this is going to fall apart this season is still my sense, but it's interesting that's still that connection isn't gone quite yet, I think is worth saying. And Roma did win this game, and they won it in not a very pretty fashion. I think this will not go down as a game to remember at all. And I think that you can have a certain amount of sympathy for Mourinho with the injury situation in defence, in particular, having to draw Cristante, who's really been the best player in that team so far this season, back to play in a back three is not ideal. I think we can maybe have some questions about whether or not a back four would have been a different alternative to doing that, but that's a whole bigger conversation perhaps than I want to get into on this right now. But it certainly is, short-handed at the back, and having to make that decision, I think you can forgive not beautiful football in this game. I think most Roma fans would have come into this game saying, actually, the quality of football for this one game doesn't matter. It just matters that they get the result. And I think it's okay to view football games like that sometimes. I think it's okay to say, yes, this hasn't resolved all of Roma's problems, and not everything has to be the big narrative this way and that way. Yes, it's all fixed. No, it's all broken. They needed to win this game, and they did. And there are positives within that. Lukaku scoring again is a positive, 3 goals in 5 games. Clearly, he's providing some value for them, and that's important. And you think this team is also missing Tammy Abraham up front. The fact they kept a clean sheet is important. And I did wonder to myself, it's really hard because I don't think you should pin anything all on one player. And Jose was talking about it in a sort of more self-directed way during that same conversation with the press between the Genoa game and this game, where he was saying, look, it wasn't all me when we were in European finals. It's not suddenly all me now that we're losing. And that's true. And perhaps it's equally true that we can't say it's all Rui Patricio when they stop losing here. But Rui Patricio has the worst save percentage in Serie A, and it's not close. He's below 50% this season. And I think it's perhaps also not a coincidence that Roma finally got this win in a game when they allowed 0 shots on target. And is that the standard they have to maintain right now to keep winning? Is just not to let anyone shoot, or at least get a shot on target. That's a pretty impossible bar. But I think that a grim performance that at least didn't allow Frosinone to get those chances, didn't allow Patricio to be tested, was just exactly what they needed, and they got it. And that's really perhaps all in the end that matters about this game, is that they got it, and they did score a second goal in the end and make it into a more comfortable win. So curious to hear what you think about the situation Roma Mina. Do you feel more sympathetic for Jose, or do you feel that he deserves all the criticism coming his way? It was interesting. DAZN wanted to do the link up with him after the game, get him chatting to the studio, as they so often do after games, and he just said, "No, I'm too tired." Didn't want to put the earpiece in and wouldn't do it. And he looks tired to me, and I still think for me the big worry with this team is Jose third season syndrome. Frankly, he asks so much of the people around him. He demands all in all the time, and when people are tired in the third season, does that still work? So yeah, curious to hear what you think about the Roma situation, for certain. Curious also, Mina, there's a question I wanted to ask you about Lautaro this week. So clearly the headline grabber of this week, Lautaro Martinez coming off the bench for Inter and scoring 4 times as they came from 0-0 when he came on against Salernitana to win 4-0. Just outrageous behaviour from Lautaro, who's now scored 9 goals already in this Serie A season. He's the first Serie A player ever to come off the bench in a game and score 4 times after coming off the bench in the second half. I was just thinking back, I suppose, because it was also a weekend when Lukaku scored, and I was thinking back to when Lukaku was in his first era at Inter, and we would have conversations about where he ranked in the all-time greatest striker ranking, and you were always a lot more sceptical of his place in that ranking than I was. Sorry, my computer's blooping at me in a way that is now very distracting. Can I silence that in the background? And Yeah, I'm curious because I think this more than ever for me is the season when Lautaro's on deck, right? Like nobody is questioning that Lautaro has been an excellent striker for Inter for a long time. I think that's not in doubt. I think he's been building up to being one of the best in the world, and I think perspectives on where he was in that conversation have been swayed back and forth by different things. Obviously, was fundamental to getting them to a Champions League final last season, but also part of that story was, wow, in one season he's been in a Champions League final and a World Cup final, but he was terrible in the World Cup final, and this was sort of this counter narrative of is he really there? But this season, with Dzeko gone, with Lukaku gone, this is not to minimise Marcus Thuram, who's come in there and has been brilliant already with 4 assists, and Thuram we can talk about a lot. But this is Lautaro's attack now. Everyone else is supporting act to his leading actor, I think. And yeah, do you see something changing? Do you think that this is a point where we start having that conversation about putting him in those very top strikers in the world? Am I getting ahead of myself? Should we wait and see if we get the hot and cold streaks we're so familiar with? I feel like maybe that's a perspective I'd like to hear from you, Mina, if your thoughts on Lautaro have been changing. Because I think maybe it's still too soon for me, but I think that this is the moment when they can change. This is his season for me, like I just said, in a big way. And for now, the Toro, the bull, is grabbing that bull by the horns for sure. So yeah, brilliant stuff for him and for Inter Milan, obviously keeping pace with them at the top as well. Napoli suddenly back to winning ways, almost like they needed that little crisis, like they needed that little drama to kick them out of their funk. And interesting to hear Victor Osimhen this weekend as well, finally coming out and making his statement about things that have gone on, and in particular focusing his attention on the fans in Naples and reasserting his connection to them and how much they mean to him. And I think it's going to get sold as a don't listen to the media conversation. And of course, that's perfectly something he's entitled to do. I think it's a bit rich to blame it all on the media and outside people unsettling him, because in the end, the media get lots wrong all the time. I get things wrong all the time. I'm never going to be the person who sits here and says journalists are some flawless cast, because we're not. But nobody in the media made Lukaku go and delete a bunch of pictures of himself in an Napoli shirt, and that was the thing that a lot of fans were hurt by and took umbrage by. That was why the Curva in the midweek game had the banner up saying that the number one commandment is respect the shirt. That's nothing to do with us. That's not us in the media and what we've been saying about it. That's between Lukaku and those fans. And I think clearly the statement is designed to mend those bridges and perhaps to deflect and put that onto someone else as well. But yeah, I'm off to Naples, as you know, Mina, and I can't remember if I mentioned on my last recording. I'm off to Naples tomorrow. I'm recording this on Sunday night. I fly Monday to Naples. I'm going to be there late on Monday. I get in, so I'm ready for the Champions League game against Real Madrid. Really, really excited for that one. I'll be doing that for Stan Sports sideline reporting with Semra Hunter, who I've done podcasts with before, but I've never worked with in person. So really excited for that. I hope we put on a good show for those of you watching Australia, and hope that Napoli put on a good show against Real Madrid. I think they have found a little bit of confidence in a timely moment when they needed it, and we'll see if that can carry over enough to hang with Madrid. Other little notes from this week, things that jumped out at me. Albert Gudmundsson, I talked about definitely in my last voice note. Scoring twice against Udinese, so the first Icelandic player to score more than one goal in a Serie game. He's something, Mina, and that was, I guess, one more question I had for you. Is there anyone who's jumped out to you so far this season as unexpected surprise packages? Because for me, he's definitely one of them. With the way he's been going, as I mentioned on my last postcard, leading the way in Serie A. I haven't checked the stats after this game, but right up there as one of the highest successful dribble stats in the league. So yeah, I'd have to double check on those before I could confirm that's still true. But he's right up there regardless. So yes, Mina, Gudmundsson, clearly a surprise package. Who else have been your surprise packages this season who you're enjoying watching? And I guess I'll speak to you very soon. We're hoping, listeners, we're hoping to do a recording together on Thursday after the Champions League round, so finally get one. We're both on at the same time rather than just these postcards, but we will keep you posted about that. And for now, I'll hand you back to Mina.
Hi Nicky, hi Chronicles Tifosi members. I hope you're all well. I'm coming to you on Monday night. I have been on Premier League duty and I have had a weekend that has been crazy in every way, shape or form. I am somewhat exhausted and I'm just dying to get into bed. And I wouldn't mind being on a remote tropical island, just sunning myself already. And we're only on week 7, so... But either way, it's just been crazy because I have had a podcast this morning. I had to deliver my column deadline in. I had to go to Stockley Park and do a show on the Premier League and watch all the games over the weekend. I watched so many Premier League games in the weekend. Imagine having so much fun watching the likes of Liverpool and Tottenham. And of course, Wolves defeating Manchester City, Manchester United doing something really bizarre against Crystal Palace, and then having to painfully sit through what can only be described as the worst game I think I've ever watched in my life, which was the Atalanta and Juventus game. And it's 90 minutes that I will never get back in my life. And Nicky, you and I have both started on a sour note. So I am a little bit exhausted because I haven't really slept. I've only managed 3 hours today and I managed 4 hours the day before. It's either writing or recording. And don't get me wrong, I love doing all of the shows that I'm doing right now and I'm very grateful for it. But I'm also kind of aware of the fact that my health doesn't allow me to do too much. So I'm afraid that I won't be able to work tomorrow. So I'm going to be taking it off. So I will be sitting on a sofa and trying to see if there's somehow I can watch you reporting on the Napoli game. I'm sure you'll smash it. Samra is such a lovely girl. I worked with her at TRT. And so... say hello and I hope that you have a fabulous time, and I'm sure you'll smash it. Nicky, it's you. Who are we talking about? But yes, okay, so a few things that I wanted to speak about. You mentioned Gudmundsson as being one of the players that you just thought had such an amazing start to the season. And as it turns out, his mother's an international player. His uncle, his father, his great-grandfather played for Arsenal as well as for Milan in 1940. First Icelandic player to score a brace in Serie A. So he comes from really good stock because his whole family, mother, father, uncle, father, grandfather, great-grandfather, is the one who I believe was the first Icelandic player to play in Serie A. So... it's crazy. So yes, he's doing a great job, but obviously comes from a significant footballing family that have done a tremendous job over the years. So it runs in his DNA. Interestingly enough, today actually, there's a talent scout, who basically hires the talent for Premier League shows. And she is the daughter of a famous Australian footballer, Robbie Slater. And she was being introduced to Kelly Cates, who's obviously the daughter of Kenny Dalglish. And they both don't know who their fathers are. They're just like, hi. And then someone tells them. And you just see it's just so much respect and admiration. And I'm just standing there and I was like, well, now I feel like my dad's a failure. So obviously he's not, but it just kind of felt a bit like I was the only one left out because it was the three of us and my dad wasn't a footballer. First world problems. But anyway, so yes, covered a lot of the English football. Sadly had to watch Juventus. Thankfully, Inter somewhat saved me because it was great to watch Lautaro Martinez scoring 4 goals in 27 minutes as the substitute, making history. and I thought your question was an interesting one. Where does he stand in my rankings? Firstly, I wouldn't give my rankings that much respect. I always find this an interesting question. People always ask me, how good is Haaland? Is he the best we've ever seen in the Premier League? And I think, for one thing, longevity makes a difference, right? Like, Brazilian Ronaldo was, at the time, the greatest thing we'd ever seen. Romario, for me, was the greatest thing I've ever seen. But it's how long they stick around and show you that every day and play with that kind of consistency that Messi and Ronaldo have played with, whereas every year you depend on them to guide their teams forward and score a boatload of goals and produce a number of assists. And not only that, but change the team psychologically, push the team forward. And yes, where does the great Haaland stand with that? And then you're asking me now about Lautaro Martinez in my rankings. And there's also a personal preference, right? Because I think Messi might be the best player in the world, or potentially ever, up there with the greatest. But I've always leaned towards Ronaldo that bit more, not because I think he's a better player. I don't. I actually think Messi is, or potentially is. It's that the way that Ronaldo has built himself, or what he can do, or it just resonates with me a little bit more. I like the fact that he's worked so hard to be the player that he is. I appreciate his mentality. I appreciate his psychology. I appreciate how much he can change games with just his determination, and not reliant on just his technique. Like, if you are a team chasing a trophy, then I think you want Ronaldo on your side over Messi. And that was, for me, like, one of the things why I resonated with him, because I just really respect that work ethic. And so when it comes to strikers, I don't resonate with anyone because I don't know how to play football very well. But I guess it's players who do things that I can't understand how they manage it, if that makes sense. And why I love Benzema when we used to do the ranking so much, and I told you that I wasn't a big fan of Lukaku, is because there was so much, like, Lukaku scored a lot of goals, but there was so much to his game that I was not a fan of. But Benzema, it's that he can drop deep, that he can be the man who would provide for Ronaldo. He could be the man who would make the front three play perfectly. He was the man who helped develop Vinicius Jr. into this rocket that he's become now. It's the man who, when they're losing in the Champions League, turns around to Modric and says, "This is what you're going to do, and this is how we're gonna turn this game around." And they did it for 3 games in a row, and you just think, that is a superpower. Like, there are so many great midfielders in the world, Xavi, Iniesta, but Andrea Pirlo, Iniesta is definitely up there. But, obviously I just mentioned 3 of the greatest, or Modric and Kroos. But one of the reasons why they are the best is also the psychology of it. Like, when people ask me the greatest Italian midfielder in the last decade or whatever, I have to say Andrea Pirlo. And it is not because he's the greatest player, but because he is, but it is also his ability to adapt to every situation, to show his strengths with every coach, in every circumstance, against every type of opponent, and to have the emotional intelligence to understand the phase of the game and the situation that you're faced with. And nothing showed me that more than in 2012, when it was the penalty shootout. I don't know if it's the quarterfinals. It must be the quarterfinals against England. And Joe Hart had come out and said that he had studied the Italian penalty takers. So England were very confident at the time. And it was one of the first matches I'd ever worked in football. And I was watching it live on TV and anxious about celebrating Italy, or potentially crying, because I didn't want to show my emotions to be with Italy, because we were on an English show, and I thought that I would get a lot of hate at the time. And it was just the understanding, Pirlo seeing that his side was, and Buffon feeling like he didn't, has he studied? He was asked about this. Had you studied the English penalty takers? And Buffon was like, no. I remember that being an issue now. I'm starting to feel like my memory is going. And then Joe Hart comes and he starts jumping up and down in his goal and looking really confident. And it was just Pirlo understanding in that situation that he needed to deliver a Panenka and shut it down. And I loved him for it. I loved him for understanding football, for understanding the moment of when to give your team something more on a psychological level. He's just not just a great player. He's just so much more than that. And that's what I think of Benzema. And so when I think of great players, yeah, that's who I go for when I think of great strikers. Or, Haaland is somebody who can definitely be that, But yes, I'm a football capitalist, if you like, and I've just gone used to seeing some greats. And I think Lautaro scoring 4 shows just how much he's growing in each game. He's more dependable. He's helping the side a lot more in the way that they're playing in the final third. But if you ask me in Serie who the best striker is, I'm just not even gonna. I mean, it's Victor Osimhen, and it's Victor Osimhen for me. Over and over, it's gonna take a while before I'll change my mind about that. Osimhen to me is everything, from the way he talks, from the way that he is with his teammates, for the way that he played. He's a striker I would love to have on my team. So I don't even know if Lautaro Martinez for me is the best striker in Serie A. But when it comes to goal scoring, yeah, he's phenomenal. And I think that he's improving. And I think his ceiling is so high. And I think he'll get even better and better. And he's a World Cup winner. And one day he could potentially be the best in the world. But at this very moment, I would choose Osimhen. But yes, moving on. Speaking of football capitalists, I found myself the football communist. And it's Maurizio Sarri. I did think it was hilarious that he said that Lazio was on the right track after their loss to Milan. It kind of makes me think if he understands what's going on or not. And then he ranted about the timings and the schedule and how many players are just exhausted and what's going on. But he also said something that I thought was significant and that was worth mentioning. He said, they are sending these lads to the slaughter with nobody intervening. This is football now. You take the money and run, except all the money doesn't make it down to Serie C, where you cannot make a living as a professional player. All this money in football gets poured into 40 or 50 players. And I mean, he has a point, right? And I just feel like it's an important thing to note about and something for us to ponder going forward. Just the way that this footballing business is being run nowadays. But yes, Lazio certainly need to address their problems, and I do feel sorry for him that some of his players have arrived so late in the transfer market, and he hasn't had time to really embed them. But I am really happy for Stefano Pioli and Milan, because like I said, I thought they had excessive criticism after their failure in the derby, and it was indeed a failure. But they're level on points with Inter. I think they've been fantastic quality to watch on the most part. They're still trying to find the gears, but Okafor scoring goals, Pulisic is turning up. I think Reinders has just been such a pleasure to watch. Unfortunately, Loftus-Cheek is injured now, but there is much to admire with this Milan side that everyone sort of looked at as being so tiny in comparison to this wonderful Inter. And Inter is this wonderful Inter, but Milan also deserves a little bit of respect, and I just feel like it can happen. It can happen when you have a new team and you played it poorly, your tactics were wrong, but that doesn't take away from the fact that you could achieve something special this season, and I really want them to. It's interesting because of how we look at players, because I just feel like Pioli immediately had, there was a hashtag with Pioli out after the derby, and meanwhile, Zerbi loses 6-1 to Aston Villa and all, and everyone still thinks he's a genius of football, and I do think that obviously De Zerbi's style of play is more beautiful to watch than most coaches in the world, but he is very exposed defensively, and yes, it is Brighton. He is doing it with players that you would never expect him to do it, but how many people have watched De Zerbi football and knew that Villa would just ruin them if they were direct and made it man for man and looked for the jewels? It's kind of like the predictable way of destroying De Zerbi's football, and I'm always amazed that not more people do it, but I trusted Unai Emery to do it, and it was the first time I put a very big bet on football, on the Premier League. And I put Villa to win and over 3 goals. I had fun with that. Yes. Meanwhile, what else did I want to talk to you about? Roma. Oh, yes, that's the thing. Roma. Well, at least Lukaku's scoring for them, and he seems to be developing a nice relationship with Paulo Dybala. I did also like Alexis Sanchez's impression of Dybala when he was just leaving Marcus Thuram isolated the whole time while he was somewhere in midfield. But back to Roma. I kind of agree with what you're saying about the way that he is. And it's so funny because it's like every day he needs to remind us that he's the guy that took Roma to 2 finals. And he can feel something is changing. Oh, I'm the one that they came for me, and I was offered lots of money, and I chose to stay here, so you should love me because of it. And it kind of like she'll kill me if I tell you this, but one of my really good friends has a really toxic relationship with her ex, and he's trying to get back together with her. And he said to her, look, I know you have your admirers, but I have them too. I have so many more. In fact, the other day, this girl said to me, and I'm like, is this how he's trying to get back together with you? And it's like trying to remind her of what she lost. Like, everyone wants me. I'm still great. I'm still wonderful. I still got you to 2 finals. So please don't judge this Roma side by these abysmal results, Keep following me, and look at us. We managed to win against newly promoted Frosinone. And so, and I just, third season syndrome, I don't know. I mean, I do enjoy the fact that Conte is now being linked with the job. I kind of feel like the media in Italy has like this little bowl in which they dip their hand like a lucky dip and pull out a name to suggest a specific coach who will take over or link him to a specific job. And it's and that little basket that they have is always Conte. Like, it's whichever job. If Inzaghi gets sacked, it's Antonio Conte. If Allegri goes, it's Antonio Conte. If it's Roma, it's Antonio Conte. But if it's the smaller teams and they have different names, once upon a time it was Terza Cosmi, So it's this kind of thing, and I just kind of feel like, either Roma is just going to launch this massive war against attacking football by having Mourinho, then following up with Antonio Conte, then by all means have fun with it. But probably not the coach that would suit Roma if indeed Mourinho goes. But let me know what's going on in Napoli.
Serie Chronicles is a Chronicles production.